across the world. We've been doing a series where the Jewish community history we've been exploring quite recently with regards to South America. We only 2 weeks ago we spoke about various countries in Asia. We've already spoken about maybe about 16 countries already. We spoke about countries such as Gibraltar, even Afghanistan and stuff like that. Now we are concentrating on South America at the moment, the history of the Jews from Chile. That's what we're going to do in today's special edition over here. And please, anyone, welcome to the channel if anyone's watching at the moment live. Now, the history of the Jewish community of Chile dates back to the arrival of Europeans to the country. Actually, interesting enough, because usually we speak about, over time, Chile has received, let's say, various different contingents of Jewish immigrants. Now, currently, the Jewish community in Chile comes mainly from, let's say, migrations occurring in the 19th and 20th century, actually mostly from Eastern Europe background in of itself, so quite an interesting thing. Remember, we've already spoken about Brazil, Uruguay, Venezuela, here in this series, Cuba, Peru, so now it's always good to speak about Chile. So seemingly, unlike those countries, it was really around that time period where the majority of the people would have been from Eastern Europe that would have come in initially. Now, Chile is reported over to be the third largest Jewish community in South America. Currently, a population, according to recent estimates, between 15,700 to 16,000, and that's this year respectively. Obviously, it's going to be behind Argentina and Brazil, let's just say, as the biggest communities in South America respectively. Now, let's just the vast majority, let's say the nucleus of the community is in an area called Santiago. That's where most of the Jewish people live, but there's other small cluster of groups in other places, let's just say, which will, and I think the Jewish population, if I'm not mistaken, represents less than 0.1% of the total Chilean population, respectively. So that is very, very interesting. And I think there are many Chileans that do have Jewish ancestry, which would be a higher figure than the current Jewish population in of itself. Let's explore the history of the country, Chile. Now, friends, I'm going to say a blessing over a coffee at the moment. Just adding a coffee. Now, firstly, we have to go back to the Spanish colonization area, and that was really the first settlement of Chile, just like the other countries in itself. The first Jews would arrive in Chile were the Spanish, let's say, conquistadors. I hope I pronounced it correctly. They seeked at that point in time to flee the religious persecution of the Spanish Inquisition. Many would end up converting to Catholicism to hide their Jewish origins at that point in time, and the majority of Jewish people immigrated to the Americas in the early years of the conquest because the Inquisition had not yet reached them at that stage in time. So that's very, very interesting. There was a key person named Diego Garcia de Caceres. He was a person, an acquaintance and a faithful acquaintance, and executor of the founder of Santiago, someone named Pedro de Valdivia, who was one of them. I think in colonial times, reported over using Wikipedia as a source over here. The most prominent Jewish character in Chile was a surgeon, someone named Francisco Melandono da Silva. He was one of the first directors of San Juan de Dio Hospital, a key figure in Chile history without a doubt. Now, Maldonado da Silva, I think, was an Argentine Jew born in San Miguel de Tucumán into a Sephardic family over there that actually came from Portugal at that point in time. He was accused by the Inquisition tribunal of attempting to convert the devout Christians at that stage in time, Christian nurses, to Judaism. Now, it's interesting, Maldonado openly decided that he was a Jewish person and was sentenced, unfortunately, he was, you see, anti-Semitism all throughout Jewish history, he was sentenced to be burned at the stake, the Auto da Fe. I think this was in the year 1639. Now, entire crypto-Jewish families were publicly converted to Catholicism, but privately remained Jews arrived. Like in the rest of Latin America, the original Jewish settlers did not retain their identity over the generations and were evidently assimilated into broader majority of the Chilean Catholic society. As such, the Jewish community of Chile today only really begins with Jewish immigrants of the 19th century, respectively. So that's very, very important to estate over. So let's speak about a little bit about the famous person, the Francisco Maldonado da Silva. Or he was also known under his Jewish name, Eliyahu Hanazir. He lived between 1592 and he was born in Argentina. And I think his life came to an end in 1639 in Peru. He was an Argentine Marrano, as we mentioned about a physician. At the end, he died. He was burnt to the stake with 11 other Jewish people in Lima in Peru. Let's just say at that point in time it was Otto da Fe recorded in history, the largest one. His life was novelized by Argentine best-selling author, someone named Marcus Aguinaldo, in his book Against the Inquisition. And it's interesting, the famous man Francisco was actually born in San Miguel de Tucumán, let's say a Marrano family of Portuguese Jewish background. He would become a physician at that stage in time. Now, he would become a famous medical man, let's just say. He studied Kabbalah and various other scriptures and was a medical student also at the same time. After 5 years, he took a medical posting in Chile. During that time, he decided to assume his Jewishness openly and stop living as a Christian converso, let's just say, regaining, let's just say, his family's depressed Jewish tradition. I mean, at that point, it had become, because they had to hide it, and would do a Brit Milah, a circumcision, and adopted the name Eliyahu Hanazir, and called popularly Eli Nazareno, or Elijah the Nazarite. And he grew his hair, his beard, and very, very much, it became very well known. During those years, he was confronted, I think, 13 times by Catholic theologians who tried, let's say, to convert, bring him back to their faith. But he had astounding knowledge, and even the enemies, let's just say, at that stage in time, were very, very surprised by it. And he was ended up becoming a martyr at the end. And he had been imprisoned, I think, since 1627, and taken the Colonial Inquisition Court of Lima in Peru. And according to a 2010 book, he was imprisoned because he tried to convert his two sisters who had converted him to Catholicism. As such, he was denounced at that point in time. So much has been chronicled within regards to his life, which I recommend everyone to learn about more. Okay, let's go back now towards the Jewish history. Anyone that's tuning in at the moment, we're exploring the history of Chilean Jewish community. And so we spoke about this famous man that was burnt to the stake in 1639. An entire crypto-Jewish family at that point in time, who had publicly converted to Catholicism but privately remained Jews, would arrive to Chile. Like in the rest of Latin America, the original Jewish settlers did not retain their identity over the generations and were eventually, unfortunately, they did assimilate into the broader majority of the Chilean Catholic society. As such, the Jewish community of Chile today only really begins, like the ones that's perpetuated nowadays, you could say, from the 19th century. Now, Jewish immigration in the 19th and 20th century, now really, it was a couple of hundred years later, 1840, would see, after decades of abolition of an inquisition in Chile, let's just say, began the Jewish immigration into the country. The first Jewish people who arrived in Valparaiso were from Europe, especially from Germany and from France. One of them was someone named Manuel de Lima y Sola. He was a man who became one of the founding members of the fire department of Valparaiso, and I think come with the year 1851. And one of the founders, he was of the Chilean Freemasonry, and he created, let's just say, the Masonic Lodge and the Union Fraternal for 2 years later. Now, many Jewish people leave Chile later on in the 1970s and 1980s. In 1961, the Jewish population of Chile was actually quite high at 30,000. But come on, 1997, it would only be about 15,000 at that stage in time. So it would actually it would change dramatically at that stage in time. Very, very interesting. So 21st century, in 2012, Chilean census showed 16,294 Jews in the country, marking, let's say, an 8.8 increase from the decade before. Come what 2024, the Jewish population, according to one census, was as much as 28,153. That would represent 0.2% of the country's total inhabitants. Now, I don't think the Orthodox Jewish community is a majority in Chile. The Chabad movement, Chabad Hasidut, let's say, was first established in Chile in the year 1981 and has constructed various synagogues since then, schools and recreational centers. I think in 2016, the Jewish Active Archive of Chile was founded. That was a collection, let's say, of written and audiovisual material about Jews that were living in the country. So that's very, very interesting over here. So much can be said about it. Let's explore a few of the synagogues within regards to Chile. We're going to speak about some of the more famous synagogues. Now, anyone that's tuning into this channel at the moment, in this live video, we're exploring the history of the Jewish community of Chile. So please subscribe to the channel now. We really appreciate it. We've got fantastic content on this channel, so please subscribe. Okay, the majority of synagogues in Chile obviously are located in Santiago. Obviously, it's the home of the country's Jewish population. The community is mainly, the majority is Ashkenazic and Sephardic Jews, but there's, let's say, there's a smaller amount of Orthodox Jews, but very influential at the same time, that we can state also. Now, the synagogues in Santiago, let's say there's many synagogues all over Chile, but the several major congregations and Jewish institutions serve a diverse community in Santiago. Now, among the Ashkenazic synagogues includes the Círculo Israelita de Santiago, the CIS. It's one of the main synagogues for Santiego's, let's say, Ashkenazic community, with about 1,000 member families, featuring beautiful stained glass windows. It has a large Jewish museum. Let's just say that the largest Jewish museum in Chile is actually housed there. Then another synagogue is called the Bikur Jolim, or Bikur Cholim, you will say. It's the oldest synagogue in the capital. I think this is a more conservative synagogue, though. It's not an Orthodox synagogue, that's, I would say. I think it's located in downtown Santiago, which was built in 1930. Then the Chafetz Chaim synagogue, or also known as the Chafetz Chaim synagogue. If you want to write it in Spanish, it's an Orthodox synagogue that offers daily religious services. So they've got Shacharit, I believe, Mincha and Arvit every single day. Obviously on Shabbat also. Now the Aish Torah Kiruv Outreach Branch also have an Orthodox institution also in Chile, where they provide services, kosher foods, outreach work, and programs all over the world. So that's very interesting. So let's just point that out on the side. Now the Chafetz Chaim synagogue, I think it's also known as Chafetz Chaim. Chafetz Chaim was actually a great rabbi. Was Rabbi Kagan, who was from Europe. He actually wrote the interesting book, the Chafetz Chaim. I don't know if the name itself was named because of that itself, but that would be interesting. Now, obviously, it's an Orthodox Jewish congregation located in Santiago, in Chile. Now, it's actually interesting. I think currently, if I'm not mistaken, the synagogue has 2 rabbis, and there's Shacharit, Mincha, Arvit service, and they host various different celebrations, smachot, as they say, all over Israel. So that's very, very interesting. And obviously it's a Spanish-speaking synagogue. Now the other synagogue we were talking about was something called the Bikur Jolim, or Bikur Cholim. I think that was that's like, say, connected to the conservative movement, as we said before. That's also, I think if I'm not mistaken, this Bikur Jolim one is the oldest community in Santiago. It was founded in 1905. In the beginning, I think originally it was actually an Orthodox synagogue, but I think later on it would become a conservative synagogue. And I think the Jewish Benevolent Society Bikur Cholim emerges from the alliance of several Jewish institutions in the early 20th century. I think between the years 1905 to 1908, living at a time a succession of openings and closings, characteristics or sensitivity of each kahila. And just at the beginning of the 30s, the current building opened in Avda, in Mata in 624. It became a center, let's say, of activities and reception of Jews fleeing the Second World War in Europe. During these years, the Bikur Cholim, I think at that stage in time, became more of a meeting place where, let's say, Jewish life cycle events occurred at that point in time, like Brit Milot, Bar Mitzvahs, Chuppah and Shiva. And I think many people, it's a well-known place in Chile in of itself. Once again, I think now, or in recent years, it became a conservative synagogue. Now, more synagogues, let's just say, includes the Círculo Israelita synagogue in Santiago, and Círculo Israel. Yeah, so it's also known as well-known synagogue. Let's speak a bit more about the Jewish history of Chile over here, and especially during the 1800s and 1900s in a bit more detail at the moment. Here on this special edition, anyone that is tuning in at the moment, we are exploring the history of the Jewish community of Chile over here at the moment. Let's go back a bit more to the colonial period. Let's go back a bit more. Obviously, we spoke about how the conversos will actually come into Chile earlier on in the 1500s, secretly practicing Judaism at that point in time. And we spoke about Diego Garcia de Caceres of Palanscan of Spain, who had been a converso, I think. We spoke about the 1621 era. There was a genealogy of Caceres was traced and included many prominent families in Santiago, including the founder of the Chilean independence movement, Jose Miguel Carrera. That was what we spoke about. And we spoke about the Court of the Inquisition, which was established in Lima in 1570, had authority over what is now Chile. And we spoke about Francisco Maldonado de Silva, who was one of the martyrs over there at that point in time. Obviously, he became openly, let's just say, Jewish at that stage in time. And we spoke about it was on I think it was January the 23rd in 1639 when there was he was sentenced at that point in time. And there was actually a physician named Rodrigo Henriquez de Fonseca of Santiago, and I think his wife were also killed at that point in time, I think in 1644, if I'm not mistaken. So you can see that the anti-Semitism there was at that point in time. In the 17th century in of itself was a lot of anti-Semitism going on inside the country, and various different problems. There was someone named Captain Leon Gomez de Olivia, who would have his stuff confiscated, his possessions taken, and was punished also respectively. That's, you can see just the horrors of the anti-Semitism that would actually occur from all that point in time. And then really I think it was not till the persecution of conversos ceased when the country would actually gain its formal independence in the year 1818 respectively. So very interesting. I think it was until the Declaration of Independence that was proclaimed in 1818, entry into Chile was prohibited to foreigners, especially to Jewish people. So you can see anti-Semitism. At that time, there were no traces of Judaism, let's just say, that might be attributed to descendants of crypto-Jews. Nevertheless, Judaizing sects of Indian ancestry were discovered, I think, in the 20th century. So people would come about there at that point in time. Much is actually chronicled over during there was observant Jewish communities, commandments, people we see that were keeping certain things. And during the last decades, I think, of the 19th century, the liberal governments promulgated a series of laws that include the creation of lay cemeteries where burials would be granted without distinction of creed or religious denomination. These laws, I think, unfortunately were attacked by the Catholic Church at that point in time, which would promote, let's say, dramatic conflicts between conservatives and liberals, terminating with the victory of the liberal government and the establishment of the cemeteries respectively at that point in time. Let's speak about the early during the 19th century itself, individual Jews would actually reach Chile. Many of them, I think, were partly assimilated within the population. And there was obviously pogroms taking place in Russia, which we spoke about, especially in 1881, 1882. So Chile was mentioned as a possible haven for persecuted Jews during the subsequent years. And I think at the beginning of the 20th century, they began to increase in number. Most prominent immigrants were Eastern Europeans initially, the First World War time period. But I think as time went on, some people would have settled initially in Argentina, and many Sephardic Jews from Monastir would actually arrive also in South America, in Chile especially, and that would really make about the cornerstone of the Sephardic Jewish community in Chile at that stage in time. There were many different, let's say, early arrivals at that point in time, included someone named Naum Trumha, who was the son of settlers of Moisville in Argentina. They were prominent among the latter sectors, where the Testa, the Arusta, the Albala families actually came. The first communal prayers were held in Santiago in the year 1906. There was the first Jewish organization, also known as Sociedad Union Israelita de Chile. It was founded in 1909, and I think many Jews did not feel like secure because it was a Catholic state, so at that one time, and they camouflaged their other organizations with such inconspicuous names, let's just say, in of itself. To I think included among the names was Philharmonica Russa, which was founded in 1911. If I'm not mistaken, Central Macedonia was founded in Temuco in 1916 by Sephardi Jews from Monastir, as mentioned before. Now, we recorded a video of the history of Macedonian Jewry also. Now, the Central Macedonia united all the Jews from this southern city, including the small group of Ashkenazim, and was, let's say, converted in the 1930s into the Jewish community of Temuco. The first Jewish organization, I think, in Valparaiso was Max Nordau organization, which was founded in the year 1916, which also would unite Jews, Sephardim and Ashkenazim. In 1922, the Sephardim formed their own community. It was actually called the Union Israelita de Education Y Beneficiary. So over there. Now, just like in all the other South American countries, especially in early 1900s, Zionistic activity would very much start increasing. Come on, the year 1910 especially. I think but it was before the Balfour Declaration. There was at that point in time the internal recognition, I believe, of the aims of Zionism at that point in time after World War I. This would notably, let's say, at that point in time, increase its momentum. Obviously, after the First World War, its wake would actually come about. There was a tragic week in Argentina in January 1919, which brought the need for a centralized Jewish organization, which would end up being expressed. And consequently, I think September 1999, at the first Congress of Chilean Jewry, had been actually convened at that point in time. It was attended by representatives of 13 organizations from 6 cities, including both Ashkenazic and Sephardim, together with representatives of the Hijostasión from Karakurutin, the Organization of the Indian Judas, and the Congress will deal actually itself with Jewish matters of a general and local nature. And obviously there was differences of opinions that would establish, I think, very much, and Zionism will start at that stage in time to really increase. Now, what's interesting is also the Sephardi organizations increased in number and diverse activities. WISO was founded in 1926, and there was a growing youth organizations, let's just say, would unite to form the Association de Jeunes Israélites in 1928, which continued to administer the policy media of, let's just say, and also developed the legal and service. Zionistic activity had likewise made great gains. As early as 1922, Chilean Jews will contribute more in the Jewish National Fund, and then Jewish communities started becoming a larger population. 1,600 persons acquired the shekel in 1929, and then Keren HaYisod, the famous organization, had considerable revenue. On the other hand, during and following the 1920s, unfortunately there was anti-Zionist and particularly communist elements which would reach, let's just say, among Jews in Chile. 1930 to 1932, there was a severe crisis that overtook organization life in Santiago, especially in the Círculo Israelita and Federation of Sionista. In part, the crisis stemmed from the financial difficulties faced by the Jewish organization as a result of the economic crisis, which will greatly affect the peddling businesses at that point in time. And this will bring about tensions, I think, at that point in time within the Zionistic movement itself, and social and political instability at that stage in time. So now that will be an interesting point in time. There was various local groups, I think, at that point in time that was about, and there was various different debates, robust debates at that point in time. I think it was on the the eve of World War II. A new committee for immigration was established, whose composition and activities were agreeable on all sides. And there was restrictions and difficulties imposed by immigration. Thousands of Jews from Germany entered the country during the 1930s and quickly would establish an auxiliary organization. I think at that point in time, the Comité Israelita des Socorros, this was in 1933, a communal institution, and there was a B'nai B'rith Lodge, I think, in 1937, and other social, let's say, organizational elements was added to Chilean Jewry and left its mark on the community as a whole. Now, obviously, there was a political transition and there was a huge impact because of the Holocaust. There was economic difficulties in Chile. Will follow, I think, by the Wall Street crash, I think, in 1921, and it would promote at that point in time the emergence of anarchists, communists, socialists, and later fascists who professed admiration, let's just say, for the authoritarian regimes in Spain and Italy. A few Jewish people at that point in time were represented among former groups. Information on the arrival, let's just say, of Jewish anarchists to Chile was scarce, let's just say, since the government expelled them as soon as their ideological inclinations were revealed. And that was an interesting point in time. And so much can be actually chronicled over, I think, at that point in time. There was socialist Jews, there was communist Jews at that point in time, and immigrants that bring various different ideological affiliations from Europe. Let's just say many of them were adopting ideas from Chilean, especially from studying in university. Members of former groups were active in other socialist groups while in Europe, and some expressed themselves and conducted their activities in Yiddish, interesting enough. So there was various different leaflets at that point in time, I think in different languages also, which I have to point out. And many of the Chilean politics were influenced, as I say, by right-wing ideologists and so on and so forth at that point in time. I think at that time, let's just say, the World Jewish Organizations concentrated efforts to find countries prepared to admit Jewish immigrants on the Atlantic coast, and had no interest. I think at that point in time, there wasn't much interest per se in Chile as a destination. Obviously, fortunately, the disgraceful, terrible Hitler would actually ascend to power in Germany, and the Jewish community in Chile organized demonstrations to protest in all cities. As a result of its efforts, the Chamber of Deputies sent a telegram to Hitler condemning the persecutions of the Jews. Now, I think in 1936 we saw the growing demand of Jews to emigrate to Chile, obviously at that point in time, and there was international pressure on the Chilean government to admit them. And at that point in time, so much can be chronicled also about this. I think some refugees, 879 in number, would reach Chile after the outbreak of the Second World War, were accepted on condition that they settle in the south and not to move to the capital. I think 15 families made an attempt at agricultural settlement at that point in time, and especially on the island of Quilio, and dozens of others were supposed to follow them. The rest settled in cities of the south. After several years of living, let's say there was difficult climate and economic conditions, a sizable number settled in principal cities of the country. And this move in turn, let's just say, was exploited by anti-Semites who had already attempted to harm Chilean Jews during the 1920s, and anti-Semitic activities unfortunately would take over. It would increase during the 1930s, especially during the wartime period, and they now demand that all German refugees be obligated to settle in the south over there. Very interesting. I think 1936 was following the Spanish Civil War and growing influx of refugees. Chile increased its restrictions on immigration due to unemployment, and the right wing opposed to admission of both Republican Spaniards and Jews at that point in time. So I think come September 1938, the anarchists, let's just say, tried to overthrow the government. The police captured, and I think reported was killed 62 students over there at that point in time that belonged, I think, to the Nazi party, and provoking, let's say, a strong reaction against President Arturo Alistrid Palma and his candidate for the elections that were planned for the end of the year. Left-wing parties, I think, at that point in time, offered the Nazis an amnesty in exchange, let's say, for the electoral candidate at that point in time, by a small margin. And the foreign minister, I think, someone named Abraham Ortega, began helping Spanish Jewish immigrants. Some Chile consuls in Germany objected, and so on and so forth. And much more can be described with regards to that period. There was so that was a whole topic on itself. I don't want to speak so much about 1939 to 1945 period. That is a whole class onto itself, but I recommend everyone to educate the next generation within regards to that period. Now, Jewish education in Chile, which began in a small school established in Santiago, that was in the year 1914, was under the supervision of the Education Committee. I think the committee had operated since 1944. Come on 1967, within the framework of these, there were 3 schools at that point in time in Santiago. There were 1,217 students and 140 in Valparaiso. As of 2004, the institution heroed Dr. Chaim Weizmann was a main Jewish day school in Santiago. I think there was 1,400 students from kindergarten to high school, and there were 3 Israeli teacher couples sent from Israel as shlichim at that stage in time. And one of them was from the Orthodox sector. A new Orthodox school was opened in Santiago, organized and directed by Jewish people from the United States of America. Anyone tuning into the video, we're exploring the history of the Jewish community of Chile. So please, if you're a guest on this channel, subscribe to the channel and join our channel now. We do fantastic content at the moment, so please join and subscribe to the channel. Now, I think the Chabad movement founded a kollel. Interesting. Kollel is like an institution where younger students will learn Torah for parts of the day, or let's just say for full points of the day in itself. So they would find a kollel, and let's say they would accept people from all religious orientations, and they would teach Judaism over there, and there was evening courses at that point in time for Hebrew. I think the Weitzman Day School in Valparaiso, Villa del Mar, had students that were both Jewish and not Jewish at that point in time, and there was actually the courses were actually done in Hebrew over there, and especially in Judaism. Now, come with the year 1965, there was a seminar on Jewish art was introduced at the University of Chile at that stage in time, and which laid the groundwork for the Centro de Estudios Judaicos of the University of Chile at that point in time. It would open in 1968, and under the chairmanship of the anthropologist Bernardo Berdichevsky at that point in time. That would be open at that point in time, and I think after Berdichevsky's emigration, I think to Canada in 1973, the CEJ was directed by the historian Gunther Bohm, and since his retirement by the historian Anna Maria Tapia Adler. Now, this center offers, let's say, a very wide selection of academic Jewish studies in Chile, but also houses the Institute of Sephardic Studies, interesting enough, directed by, at that point in time, Jorge Zuniga, who was one that organized 2 Jewish museums in Santiago and in Valparaiso, with artifacts that illustrate the history of Chilean Jews. He also organized a choir that performed Sephardi songs from the Middle East and the Balkan countries. I think in the area of informal education, there was various different Zionistic youth movements, such as HaShomer, Ha'ir Beitar, also Hanoar, also I think Hatzioni were active. Now, following the political upheavals under Allende and Pinochet, the pioneer Jewish youth movements were temporarily closed, and the active members emigrated to Israel. And now Beitar was closed, I think, in 2000, and the only, let's say, remaining pioneer youth movement was HaShomer, I'm not sure the last name, and new institutions would actually come about. Local youth movements were established, and I think the Ashkenazi community, together with a rabbi named Rabbi Weingarten, established the Beit El movement, which had communal calendar. Various different publications and culture will come about at that point in time. The Jewish press in Chile began to appear as early as the year 1919. I think it was Nuestro Ideal and René Kimento, and in 1920, the La Patria Israelita was published under the editorship of Boris Kojano. In 1930s, a monthly Nosotros was edited in Santiago by a man named Dr. Natolio Berman, and Alma Hebrea was edited in Temuco by Dr. Isaac de Mayo. In addition, let's just say, to the Bulletin of the Federation Cita de Chile, which was published in Santiago, becoming, I think, in 1935, the weekly Mundo Judeo, respectively. Over here, let's speak about the relations between Chile and Israel, respectively. Over here. Now, Chile public opinion, let's say, has often shown a marked interest and sympathy for Zionism and the state of Israel. I think in 1945, a pro-Palestinian community was founded in Santiago, and its prominent member, Senator Gabriel Gonzalez Videla, who would later become the president of Chile, was among those who sponsored the organization of the International Christian Conference for Palestine at that stage in time. Very interesting to point out, and which took place, I think, in Washington in 1945, in spite, let's just say, of its past record of goodwill, I think, towards Jewish aspirations. President Videla gave internal pressures. There were, I believe, of the Arab community, 100,000, there was 100,000 citizens of Arab descent living in Chile at that time, were known for their financial and political influence, and instructed his delegation to the UN General Assembly to abstain from voting on the resolution on the partition Palestine in 1947. Senator Humberto Alvarez, the second-ranking member of the delegation, resigned, I think, protest at that point in time. Now, this disappointment was at a critical moment, did not affect the cordial relations between both Chile and Israel. However, let's just say Chile recognized Israel in February 1949 and supported her admission to the UN. I think come what the year 1950, a non-resident minister opened a legislation of the State of Israel in Santiago, and Chile established its diplomatic representation in Israel in 1957. In November 1958, at that point in time, both raised their missions to status of embassies. And in March 1965, the embassy of Chile was transferred from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Chile abstained from voting on the UN resolution in favor of internationalization of Jerusalem in December 1949, but voted against the reunification of Jerusalem after the Six-Day War. And the Chilean-Israeli Institute of Culture, inspired by Alvarez and Carlos Vergara Barbo, is known for its diverse activities, let's just say, in of itself. In its framework of the Israeli government in international stream, agricultural missions, let's just say, from Israel is active in Chile in the field of settlement, and so on and so forth. Very interesting. Chile has made serious efforts during the government of Unidad Popular to strengthen its relations, I think also at the same time with the Arab countries at that point in time. So that also has to be pointed out. And I think various different times, different Chilean governments would have different, relationship structures with Israel. So that's something to point out. Now, as we said before, there's a Sephardic museum located, I think, in one of the synagogues in Santiago. There's also a kosher restaurant was opened in Santiago in 2004. Kosher food is also available from butcher shops and mini markets, I believe. Also, and I think currently there's more, let's just say, place at points. I'm reading from an article that might be a bit more old, so much might have actually changed at this stage in time. I think the neighborhood of Las Condes, also in Santiago, is home of major Jewish sports fans, let's just say, and sports club Estadio Israelita. The community, I think, has its own synagogue and a rabbi, and on Yom HaTzmaut, the Chilean Air Force features a performance with paratroopers. Interesting enough. I'm not sure if this was currently or previous years, at the intersection, let's say, of Avenida Manquilla and Avenida Colón is a state of 10 commandments, inscriptions with Aseret Debrot. Claims it was copied from the Jerusalem Bible and presented at the First National Congress of Young Adventists in 1981. Now, obviously, the main synagogues is the Circular Israelite synagogue in Santiago. Was built, obviously, with stained glass windows, as mentioned about, encircled by a bima, and I think it serves Ashkenazi community, which has about 1,000 families. The Sephardic congregation was the first Jewish community in Chile, started in Temuco, but would move in Santiago. About 1,000 families that are members of the synagogue over there. Very interesting enough. Now, I think there are Reform communities also and conservative ones obviously we don't, we're an Orthodox channel, we support Orthodox Judaism, the streams itself, so we don't really speak much about Reform rabbis itself, but just as a side point, I think in the Estadio Israelita, the Reform shul over there is called the Or Shalom, where I think that actually has about 2,000 families. I think that's a previous stage. I don't know if that's currently at that stage in time. But I think there's much more Orthodox synagogues also, and have come up much more in recent years, let's just say. And that has to be pointed out also. So let's speak about the rabbis of Chile. One of the rabbis, we're going to try and speak about mostly the Orthodox and Sephardi rabbis, but we might end up speaking about a few rabbis that might not be necessarily associated with Orthodox streams. So we really do, because if anyone's tuning into this channel at the moment, we record biography videos of great rabbis of yesteryear. I think the vast majority happen to be from the Orthodox stream. We will really try and make an effort on them in of itself. Very interesting. So they've had several notable rabbis. I think the late chief rabbi was Rabbi Angel Kramen Brill. We're going to speak maybe about in due course over there. And I think rabbi in Santiago includes Alejandro Bloch, also Rabbi Menashe Perman, associated with the Chabad community, Chabad Hasidut in Santiago. And I think Rabbi Angel Brill served as chief rabbi and was founder of a committee of cooperation for PS in, let's say, Chile in of itself. This was an organization that supported more human rights during his time period. And I don't know if he was necessarily very orthodox or not. We'll have to check that maybe later on. We'll find out from information. Rabbi Alejandro Bloch was a community leader, let's say in Santiago, involved in leading the Jewish community. Let's say focusing on Jewish life and communal well-being. Now, the Chabad rabbi at one point in time was Rabbi Menashe Perman in the center of Santiago, and there's another rabbi, Rabbi Ariel Sigal, serving as rabbi focused on youth. Let's just say. At that point in time, I think he was a published author with an academic background. Rabbi Mike Ben Gio, a rabbi, we're connected to Olami, Chile, if I'm not mistaken. So Ben Gio, I think, is Moroccan family originally. Other notable figures, we're going to speak in a bit more depth about a few of these rabbis also. Rabbi Shmuel Steins Handler, I think, let's just say, is currently seen as a chief rabbi of Cuba. He was born in Argentina and trained, I think he was actually training along with the conservative stream movement in Buenos Aires, and has done various different works, as to say, especially connected to Jewish culture in Cuba, and I think it was in Guadalajara in Mexico, if I'm not mistaken. So let's just say, there's also another rabbi, I think also maybe he's connected to the conservative movement, Rabbi Martin Hirsch, who was himself Chilean born and was the leader of the Mikveh Israel Emmanuel congregation in Caracal, KO, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that's an Orthodox synagogue once again. Rabbi Yosef Kleiner, who was part of the Chile, let's say, Comunidad Israelita Sephardi between 1994 to 2020, also worked in Israel as a rabbi, a psychologist, and a voice actor, interestingly enough. So that's various. Let's just speak about a few of the rabbis over here. Once again, Rabbi Shmuel Steinhandler, a famous rabbi. I think he was born in Chile, and I think considered currently the chief rabbi of Cuba, and a notable rabbi, let's just say, in Latin America. He was born in Argentina, and he could get his training from the conservative movement. He wasn't trained, I think, in Orthodox rabbinic place. So remember, we value in Judaism very, very high regards rabbinic training from the Orthodox groups. And he started, I think, he would visit Cuba regularly in 1992. He had his base in Mexico and oversaw, let's say, Jewish culture he would really promote over there in Mexico. Become, I think, the Jewish community head in Cuba. And I think he was actually being sponsored by the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee when he was actually going to Cuba. And very, very interesting. They're very prominent Sephardi rabbis. On our channel, we try and explore the history, really the rich Sephardic history in of itself. That's what one of the goals we're trying to do, explore the great rabbis that were from Sephardic countries of yesteryear. So the Chile's Sephardic Jewish community is served by several rabbis who lead, let's just say, the Comunidad Israelita Sephardi de Chile, which is centered in Santiago. They have deep historical roots, with Sephardic immigration having shaped its character in the country. Now, interesting notable rabbis over here, Sephardi rabbis in Chile include a rabbi named Rabino Daniel Zhang. He's a notable rabbi who was involved in leading studies and activities for the Comunidad Israelita Sephardi. There's, let's say, bulletin archives of the community's websites, like showcasing his great participation in various events. Especially, most notably in 2015, there was a historic Shabbat project activities connected to Chile, respectively. Other great rabbis that were connected to the Comunidad Israelita Sephardi includes a list of the Sephardic chief rabbis of Chile, including Rabbi Avi Amsalem, who would serve, I believe that's his head rabbi, between 2010 to December 2020. Another key rabbi, Rabbi Shlomo Meir Elhara, would serve between 2000 to 2010. Rabbi Yehuda Ari Azankot would serve between 1986 to 2000. Another famous rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda Ben Amu, would actually be the rabbi between 1978 to 1986. And Rabbi David Sharabani, between the years the 1950s to 1978. Very interesting. We've spoken about the famous Sharabani family on various occasions also. Now, other notable Chilean rabbis, we're going to try and speak more in detail about some of these rabbis in due course. Another one was Rabbi Sabbatai Joseph de Gian, who lived between the years 1883 to 1947. He was actually a Bulgarian Sephardic rabbi, an author, an educator, He would serve various communities throughout South America, especially including Chile, I think also Uruguay, if I'm not mistaken, and Argentina. He was a central figure of Sephardic Jews between the world wars. He was obviously also a rabbi, I think, in Macedonia. I think we spoke about him in the video of Macedonia and Uruguay. Also, Rabbi David Arias Whale, I think he was more of a conservative rabbi from Santiago in Chile. He actually came from great Italian Sephardic roots, if I'm not mistaken. And he would become, once he moved to Israel, he was appointed, I think, rabbi of Masorti congregation Haifa of the Moriah branch, if I'm not mistaken. Now, there were other early Sephardic immigrants. The first major wave of Sephardic Jewish immigrants arrived from a dismembered Ottoman Empire, especially in the late 19th century and the 1930s, playing a crucial role in establishing, at that point in time, the collective Jewish community in Chile. Now, obviously, the Sephardic community in Santiago was the first Jewish community in Chile, originally starting in Temuco. I think the main community later moved to Santiago and now consists of around 1,000 families. And I think there's a museum also at this point in time. Let's speak about some of the current rabbis in Chile over here. Some of them based over here. We're going to speak about, firstly, some of them named Rabbi Yosef Kleiner. I think he was born in December the 20th, 1963, so we're about 62 years of age now. He's actually an Israeli rabbi. He's a psychologist, also an actor, an intellectual. He was actually born in Buenos Aires in Argentina, and I think he would serve between the years 1994 to 2020 as rabbi of the Comunidad Israelita Sephardi in Chile, and the congregation at Dutch Shmuel Emanuel in Rehovot in Israel at a later stage. Between 2000 to 2002, he was a member of the Milmad Party Assembly in Israel. 2003, he was a candidate of the independent Kol HaRehobotim to the Municipal Council of Rehovot. So he's got like a political pedigree also to him. I think he had various acting roles in Israel also, we have to point out, very interesting enough. So many of his works was both in Spanish and in Hebrew, and he worked as psychologist in private and public practice in Israel. I think in between 2015 to 2023, he was a lecturer on Talmud at the A.J. Heschel Rabbinical School, or Seminario Rabbinico Latin America. November 2022, he published, I think, a book at that stage in time, and he speaks in various different languages. He speaks Spanish, English, Hebrew, French, Israeli, and also sign language. So he's very, very, let's just say, very well decorated from that aspect in itself. I think his family, he came from a secular Jewish family, it's reported over. That's the first thing we'll say over. And but he had strong Jewish cultural values while he was growing up. He was active in youth groups when he started Sociedad Ibérica Argentina. I think at that point in time, he loved acting at a young age, and he would do military service actually in Argentina. He would study high schools in the Seminario Rabbinico Latin America in Buenos Aires. I think that was connected, as we said before, connected to the conservative movement, respectively. And then I think later on he joined a Abarbanel Institution of Seminary or Bachelor of Jewish Studies for 4 years, for a period of time, I think. And then he would go to A.J. Heschel Rabbinical School, and I think he would study under Marshall Mayer and various other rabbis. I'm not too sure if this was actually an Orthodox school itself, because I think in 1933 he would actually be part of the Shechler Institute of Jerusalem over there. So maybe that was more towards a conservative branch once again. And then later on he would have been admitted to the Abarbanel Institute, obviously gaining his academic credentials at that point in time. I think he would teach or have in the Bet El Jewish Elementary School over there, and I think he would also start practical rabbinic training by Rabbi Abraham Skorka at a later stage. And then he would be appointed to more schools, I think, at that point in time, I think in Buenos Aires. And he took the synagogue direction of the Commandant Herzliya of Buenos Aires, if I'm not mistaken, between 1987 to 1992. He would give over lectures in B'nai B'rith and various other places connected at that stage in time, I think in the 1980s, respectively. He would then become, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the rabbi of the Sephardic congregation in Chile, I think in 1994, and during these years he would play an active role in the institution. I think it was Comunidad Israelita Sephardi de Chile. Sephardic studies over there was sponsored by the congregation and represented as well the local Jewish community, the Latin American conference, especially on various different importances. And he was also writing a monthly column in the magazine El Vocoro, if I'm not mistaken. And he was appointed the secretary of the Latin American branch of the Rabbinical Assembly, the Rabbis International Association, let's say. That was once again connection to conservative Judaism over there. So I'm not so sure, but if the Sephardic congregation itself was an Orthodox one, or was more catering to everyone, but seemingly he had close ties to conservative movement. He would later on move to Israel, as we stated before, and he became the rabbi of the Adat Shalom Emmanuel congregation over there, I think in Rehovot at that stage in time, and then he would take a rabbinical position, I think, in 2012 in the Union Liberale Israelite of France, if I'm not mistaken. He would come back to Israel in 2014 and would be part of the Moreshet Abraham congregation in Jerusalem. And I think he currently is a rabbi over there. And so once again, I don't know if he is actually an Orthodox or consider himself an Orthodox rabbi. But in himself, he did various important, let's just say, definitely from a cultural point of view, he was key rabbi over there at that point in time. He was a polymath and a psychologist also. Let's speak about more rabbis also. Rabbi Sabatier de Jayan, who we spoke about in the Uruguayan video. Also, he was born in 1883, passed away in 1947. He was born in Bulgaria, a Sephardic family. He was active in Macedonia, Romania, Argentina, Uruguay and Chile. Let's say he was a columnist, a journalist both in Ladino and in Serbian, if I'm not mistaken. He served as chief rabbi of Sephardic Jews of Argentina and Uruguay between 1929 and 1931, the chief rabbi of Bucharest from 1931 to 1944. He was born in 1883 to Joseph de Gian and Malka Bedrano, interesting enough. So he would actually study under the Alliance Rabbinical Seminary in Istanbul, which we spoke about before, under Rabbi Abraham Danan, which we mentioned him about before, and would study in the University of Belgrade. He would, I think, he would be well-traveled, especially to Bosnia, I think. He founded 2 organizations in Belgrade, and later would serve as a cantor and a rabbi, eventually end up in various different countries, especially the Kingdom of Romania. World War I, he lived in Austria-Bosnia at that point in time. He was a journalist and editor. He would become the chief rabbi of the monastery, represented the Jewish community of Yugoslavia, and he would be well-traveled all around the Balkans at that point in time. I think he would be the chief rabbi between 1925 to 1928. Will work, let's say, tirelessly for the Sephardic Jewish community across the world. I think he was one of the founders of the World Confederation of Sephardi Jews, which was established in the Vienna Conference. I think this was back in 1925 at that point in time, with the support of the government of Belgrade, and would travel various different Sephardi communities in the Americas, respectively, over there. And I think he was more liberal, let's just say, once again, within regards to Orthodox Judaism in of itself. So it will introduce more liberal ideas to the synagogue, which didn't go down too well, I think, by many people at that point in time. So that's something we'll have to also stress a bit. He would end up in South America, Rav Gian. He would, 1928, he would go there and become the chief rabbi, I think, of Uruguay and Argentina between 1929 to 1931, and very much. He founded the Jewish Sephardic Youth Club over there. I think he would actually be part. Now, in 1929, he visited the province of Arequipa in Chile for the city of Temuco. So we're speaking about Chile here today, where some Jews from the monastery had, at that stage in time, had immigrated there. As we mentioned before, there was a wave of people coming to Chile from Macedonia. So he succeeded, let's just say, in uniting the local Jews into one singular community. As a gesture of gratitude, the Jews of the Yeshiv elected him honorary chairman of the new community. So Rabbi de Gian worked diligently in collaboration with the Spanish Christian academics of the name Dr. Angel Puldo Fernandez and Rafael Casinos Essence in Spanish, to renew relations between Jews and non-Jews in the country, while improving the rights of locals, let's just say. I think for the renewal of said relations with Spain and Sephardic Jews, he visited Spain also in 1931, meeting with the Spanish minister at that point in time. And during his tenure as Sephardic chief rabbi in Buenos Aires, I think a dispute will come around in various different circles, because he brought around a more modern religious authority, let's just say, at that point in time. Eventually become the chief rabbi of Romania, I believe, and he was inaugurated, I think, the Kahal Grand Synagogue at that point in time. He would bring back Jewish studies in the yeshiva hall over there, and I think Rabbi Jacob Isaac Numerous was, I think, rabbi there before him, but much has been said. I think after he left Romania in 1944, he would visit British Palestine at that point in time, and then return to Buenos Aires and working in Sephardic congregation once again on Comodoro Street. He died in 1947. Very interesting enough. So that's let's just say something. He was also an author of various different works also. So he was a key rabbi in we're speaking about today of Chile. Now other rabbis let's talk about. Rabbi Elisha Salas, I think currently a rabbi in Chile if I'm not mistaken. He began as a Shavel Israel envoy, let's say to the B'nai Anusim communities in northern Portugal. I think in August 2010, more recently, he would be at that point in time. He actually holds a degree in accounting and administration. He teaches courses in religious studies at the University of Santiago of de Chile. He actually came to Israel, Rav Salas, in 1999, living in Jerusalem with his wife at that point in time and children, and would actually be studying in the rabbinical center of the Shehebar Sephardic Center in the old city of Jerusalem, and become a community rabbi. He'd be ordained as, and a spiritual leader and a professor of religion, a ritual slaughter of animals, and mashkiach kashrut also, let's just say. I think he actually, more recent times, was located in Belmonte in Portugal at that point in time, and let's just say, and we're really working, just say, non-stop for the community in itself. Now, I think Rabbi Salas teaches not just Torah, halacha, Hebrew, gives classes to prepare bar mitzvah and bat mitzvah children, oversees shechita and kashrut, especially for the community, for kashrut foods, for kosher foods itself, works with families that go through Jewish lifestyle events, especially through Shiva, cultural traditions, let's just say, and transmits the descendants of Maranas, B'nai Nasim, respect, social and educational activities, dealing with normal Jewish life, let's just say, in of itself. So he helps communities, teens, and young adults, and find employment, and really does brings back Yishuv Eretz Yisrael, love of Eretz Yisrael, and encouraging people to enter the land of Israel respectively. So he is a key rabbi. Rabbi Salas is doing work, let's just say, in of itself, in that specific area. So we're going to speak a bit more about the rabbis in due course. At the moment, we just spoke about a few rabbis, and let's just speak a bit more about the community structure itself. Obviously, rich community heritage that happens to be here from Chile. The community has institutions like the Sephardi Museum Museo Judeo de Chile, which, let's say, preserves the history of Sephardic immigration to Chile, let's just say. And most Chilean Jews actually based in Santiago over there. That's what we have to point out. So I think the main early initial families of the Sephardi community in Chile included the Testa family, the Aruesta family, the Al-Bala family, were among, let's say, the more prominent early arrivals over there. Now, anyone tuning into the channel now, please join our community and subscribe to the channel and join. Now, genetic legacy, it's interesting. In Chile, studies have found widespread traces of Sephardic genes among Latin Americans, likely, let's say, stemming from clandestine colonial migration of the conversos, let's say, Jews who were forced to convert into Catholicism, but secretly continued Jewish practices. Some individuals may have Sephardic ancestry from colonial times, even if they were not aware from it. I think this legacy itself was of this early migration is visible through genetic analysis. I think in a 2018 study published in the Forward, respectively. Let's explore a bit about the religion and the culture in Chile in of itself. Let's say the presence of national authorities in religious services such as Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah is a tradition that's repeated every year. And various immigrants and families came from Ladino-speaking places, German-speaking places, Yiddish, but I think more now it's English and Hebrew speakers, obviously Spanish speakers, because we're in Chile. And obviously there's different brands of Judaism in itself. I think many of the conservative rabbis actually came to Chile or graduates from Latin America Rabbinical Seminary in Buenos Aires, let's just say in itself. Obviously, we spoke about the various different synagogues in Santiago, as well as the Vilna de Mar, and I think that it's not a very large Orthodox Jewish community in Santiago, respectively. I think it's actually interesting that kosher food actually come from Chile. I help with the Orthodox Union with regards to kashrut certification, and it's available in many of the supermarkets all over Chile. I think Chile itself has its own kashrut status and its own hechsher, I think issued by the Ba'ad Rabbanim, the rabbi community from the Eish HaTorah in Chile. Very interesting. So Eish HaTorah, the Kiruv Outreach Organization, will have an integral role within regards to kashrut, let's just say, of Chile. And there's several kosher restaurants, I think, near the Orthodox synagogue in Lo Barrenche, in the municipality of Santiago. Jewish education over there is called, I think, the commission, the central commission of the place is Ba'ad Hajiniyot, in charge of the Hebrew school of Santiago. And there's Orthodox school over there. There's Vina Del Mar, has Jewish establishment of university level, Center for Jewish Studies. As I mentioned before, there are 3 Jewish schools over there. I think a lot of it is Orthodox, but some will bring about more of a conservative approach to Judaism also. That's something we have to point out. Among the youth organizations, many of it is Zionistic youth organizations. The most well known is Maccabi Hatzair, which is part of World Maccabi. There's a Tziriel Ami and the Tnuah Youth Movement, and the Instituto Hebrew of Santiago, which is part of the Noah Atzioni movement, and the Bet El, affiliated with Noah movement, respectively. There are smaller Tnuot, let's say, of Tikva, which is part of Noam. I think Noam might be more Masorti based, if I'm not mistaken, just to state on that. There's a Tnuah of Maimonides school, which is part of Akiva and Hashomat Sa'ir, which I think is the oldest inside the city. There's a Jewish media also over there. That is important also to point out. I think there's 2 media outlets, Jewish media outlets in Chile. One of them is called the Revista Shalom, which is a monthly publication. Now, it's interesting. There's various museums, as we mentioned before, in Chile. I think they're open to public, obviously by scheduling advance, including the Museo de Judeo, which I mentioned before, which is inside the community of Círculo Israel de Santiago. It's the largest Jewish museum in Chile, featuring 2 main tours, I think, respectively, Jewish history tour and a Holocaust one. And it's part of the International Council of Museums, if I'm not mistaken. The Sephardic community, as I mentioned before, has a museum showing the history of Sephardic Jews that came to Chile, starting, let's say, the collection with objects brought by immigrants since the 20th century. And this was the first Jewish museum to open in Chile. Another museum is called the Sala Judeo Aleman. It's located, I think, inside the community of Nove B'nai Israel, and showcases the history of German Jewish immigrants that arrived in Chile in the 19th century. And then there's another place, Archivo Judeo de Chile, the Jewish Archive of Chile, gathers and preserves this documentation that tells the history of the activities and traditions of the Jewish citizens of Chile, respectively, and various different other important messages. Now, I think the Jewish community of Chile, I think they are part of the World Jewish Congress. I think the president is reported over to be someone named Arela Agosin, if I'm not mistaken, over there. And the CEO is Daphne Englander, respectively, over there. So they are a World Jewish Congregation affiliate, let's just say, in of itself. Chile is. Let's speak about a few more of the rabbis that are working in Chile. Let's go back to that. Another one, a Chilean rabbi, let's just say, one had an integral role in Chile, Rabbi Jose Gabay. I think he's connected once again to the Sheheba Sephardic Center over there. He's actually of Turkish descent. He would study rabbinic halacha. We learn about Hilchot Shabbat, Isur Beheta, Aveilu Shechita, I think in the Sheheba Sephardic Center, the rabbinic college. And he went on to work as a rabbi in Montevideo, and 3 years actually he was a rabbi in Chile, in Santiago. I'm not sure the exact years. And he would work with Rabbi Shoshan Guri in Eish HaTorah, located in Santiago. So he was a rabbi in Santiago for Eish HaTorah. Also, I think with other organizations, he was also working as a chazan in Chile, a cantor, and also gave Torah classes over there. And I think currently, in recent times, he lives in Chile, and he works also in kashrut. He's, I think, an Orthodox Union mashgiach over there, at a vineyard and at a kitchen of the Jewish school over there, and gives various different informal Torah lessons to small groups of people. So he's very, very well bred, let's just say, in Chile in himself. Rabbi Jose Gabbai. He's an important person in Chile in of itself. Now, I think recently, if I'm not mistaken, a yeshiva opened up in Chile, if I'm not mistaken. I think this was quite recently. It was the first yeshiva in Chile. Let's just say it was opened, I think, just quite recently. I think only 2 weeks ago. Very interestingly, and this was the main speaker over there in that event was someone named Rabbi Osher Farkash. Very interesting enough. So this is very much documents over. Obviously, they actually just reading this from the Chabad website, the Call Live website, and they talk about how the Jewish community of Chile obviously stretches along South America's western edge. This was a historical milestone of the establishment of the first Shivat HaShluchim over there, where I think they had someone named Rabbi Moti Wenger, would outline initiatives with regards to bringing back Hasidut and Judaism, Yahudit in itself. I think there was a phone address by another Chilean Rabbi Menashe Perman, who we spoke about before. He was the head Shliach, Chabad Rabbi in Chile, respectively, over there. So he was, this event was, if I'm not mistaken, a very historic event, which only took place quite recently. And so he would be over there. And I think the mashpia of the yeshiva is someone named Rabbi Mendel Cohen, who would also speak. I think the sponsor of the yeshiva or this program or this event happened to be Mr. Ari Fried, who also is an important person connected to the Chabad movement. Also, all this information I think is actually featured on the Chabad website, the Core Live website, if I'm not mistaken. I think, I think also, if I'm not mistaken, a famous man of the name Eli Hecht, who is also Rabbi Eli Hecht, who's a shliach, would speak also over there at that point in time. And the keynote address in this historic yeshiva opening in Chile was actually done by Rabbi Osher Farkash, let's just say the mashba of the Chabad yeshiva of Argentina, who would come about. Also, I think he would give over powerful teaching of Rabbi Levi Yitzhak Schneerson over there. On the very name Chile he would speak about. So very, very interesting. So this will really be a strengthening event and a promotion event for Chilean Jewry and also for the Chabad Hasidut movement in Chile at that point in time. And other rabbis were actually attending, including Rabbi Ishai Liberson, also another shliach in Santiago, working as a rabbi over there. And obviously Rabbi Moshe Meir Perman, who the Rosh Yeshiva in himself. I think the establishment of Yeshivat HaShluchim in Chile, let's say, marks a massive turn in Jewish life within regards to this region, and they aim for it to be a beacon of Torah, Hasidut, and light, let's just say, inside Chile, respectively. This specific organization. So a very, very much important time, let's just say, in of itself. So I think there's, as I said before, Aish Chile has become grown over the years, let's just say, in of itself. And the Spanish program that happens to be in Aish, they bring many students over to Aish Torah, Jerusalem, from Chile. I think Rabbi Steve Berg, I think quite recently, only in last year, September 2024, made a special event marking Chile and the Jewish community, let's just say, and Aish Torah, and stressing how, Aish Torah has flourished in Latin America and different countries where people are learning Talmud, especially in Spanish, really is great. And I think in this momentous event that were held in Chile, the chief rabbi of Jerusalem would actually attend, Rabbi Shlomo Amar, and would give over a talk in of itself. And there's actually a Aish Torah Chile synagogue, if I'm not mistaken, and where that's very, very famous, and many different Torah scholars have been there. The Argentine ambassadors to Israel have attended there. Famous rabbis, Rabbi Shimon Axel Wanhish also attended. He was there. The various different honored people come. President Javier Milei at the Dan family Ish World Center would actually come when he came to Israel and would really make a connection with the South American students, some of them being from Chile at that point in time. So very, very interesting. Now, there was rabbinic couple also doing I think recent years, Kiruv in Chile, just illustrating how much Santiago has actually been boosted in recent years, and there's been more of an Orthodox trend in of itself. Santiago is a city, let's just say, of contrast, of a modern city, but in the center of mostly third world region, let's say, and Santiago itself is within the Andes Mountains to the east and the Pacific Ocean to the west. And it's a massive metropolitan center, complete with, let's just say, sophisticated subway system, world-renowned universities, thriving commercial centers and home of 80% of Chile's Jewish community. And a lot of Kirov networks actually taking place over that point in time. The majority, just talking about it. Now, I think recently there was someone named Rabbi Chaim Weisbluth and his wife, Rebbitzin Debbie Weisbluth, would actually take an undertaking, I think, recent years to Chile, and it's actually chronicled over in the Mishpacha magazine, I think, all the way back in 2010, about, I think this couple, if I'm not mistaken, were from New York. They would actually end up in Chile in of itself, so it's actually quite interesting. Yeah, I think they got married in Chile, this rabbinic couple did, and at that point in time there weren't many ultra-Orthodox people there, so it was an earlier time period where they were coming in, and I think they would eventually be in Eretz Israel, studying over there, and they would learn over there in various yeshivot and seminaries at that point in time, and they would really come into the realms of Kirov. I think the rabbi would actually study in Yeshivat Darkei Noam, which is also popularly known as Chappelle's, and he would later on learn in the famous yeshiva. There's a yeshiva over there. Rabbanit Debbie would actually be part of the Moreshet, a Kirov training program, I think, which was part of the Neve Yerushalayim seminary network, and eventually the rabbinic couple would study in Ner Elef, the World Training Community Outreach Center over there, would train rabbis, and eventually I think they would go out to Kirov in Chile. I don't know if they're still based in Chile or not, but they would be working there in the 2010s, early 2010s, or late 2000s, respectively, over there. And they actually opened up a branch of Morasha, Ner Elef's Learning Center for college kids in Santiago, which they were part of, let's just say, at that point in time. Rabbi Chaim Weisbluth, let's just say, would take various undertakings, I think, over there at that point in time. And there was, let's just say, a revival of an injection of more Torah lifestyle, firmness inside the place in itself. And the Morasha group will actually, let's say, blossom in Chile at that point in time. College kids in Chile that will be provided with a campus of Kirov over there. There's an outreach over there. So this was really, really bringing and strengthening, let's just say, the culture at that point in time in Kirov. So it was very, very important at that stage in time. So it was an opening, let's just say, to Jewish studies, to Kodesh studies over there, which really, really, let's just say, inject at that point in time. They would come into leadership roles, bringing about campus Kirov over there. And because most of Chile was not religious and there was much connection to conservative and reform, there was a lot of Zionistic programs also taking on leadership skills. There wasn't this more orthodox Kirov kind of network, so there was an opening over here where Morasha, the organization that was actually started through them, which was connected to Ner Elef, and really draw around attracting people to numerous, let's say, events, different learning exercises, and a kollel will be opened. I think Rabbi Matthias Libdensky will actually become the head of the kollel over there, respectively, and this will really, really, at that stage in time, strengthen, let's just say, in of itself, the community in of itself, and also Chile will really put Chile in the map with regards to Torah. And I think at that point in time, there'll be various different teaching shiurim going on over there. Many people will be attending. There'll be initially a small group of students, but eventually it will grow more and more. I think Rabbi Debbie would start teaching in Maimonides school, and at that point in time they will host a lot of Shabbat meals over there in Chile, so there was a place, a haven for Shabbat coming in, and important over there. I think there were only 4 religious synagogues, let's just say, in itself. There was Kehillat Chavetz Chaim run by Rabbi Yitzchak Shaked. There was also a Torah Chile, a Chabad, I think another synagogue, let's just say, in itself. And this synagogue, Torah of Chile, was headed, I think, in the late 2000s, early 2010s, by Rabbi Shoshan and Rabbanit Miriam Guri, I think, respectively, over there. They were an American couple that spearheaded the Tshuva movement in Chile, and they learned to speak fluent Spanish. And Rabbi Guri was part of the committee that translated, I think, the Art Scroll Siddur, famously, into Spanish. And when they left Chile afterwards, that would come, they would leave Chile a few years after the rabbinic couple of the Weissglass would actually arrive in the Shul over there, which didn't have a rabbi, I think, at that point in time. So very, very interesting. So that was a key moment. And the synagogue board would actually approach Rabbi Chaim Weisblatt to take on the position over there. He was obviously very busy with the Morsha day and night in those institutions, really providing important works in of itself, important kiruv work, educating college students, adults, within regards to Judaism. And at that point in time, there was an increase of Shomer Shabbat families in Chile. It was really, really improving. There was increasing Shabbat shopping, kashrut. Everything was improving at a much greater level at that point in time. So that's very, very important. And many people were warmed by this great kiruv approach. And because kiruv oriented synagogues, how important it was, and that was coming really to Chile at that point in time. I think the Maimonides schools at that point in time was being headed by Rabbi Avi Horowitz. The school was in itself, and really I think they would have a connection to the school also. And so they would have many guests over on Shabbat for Suda Shlishit, for example, and there was no shortage of let's just say increasing, and they would bring about more kashrut. There's Vada Kashrut of Chile, which also provides Chalav Yisrael products in of itself. And OU Heksha, as we said before, Orthodox Union Heksha will really, really flourish at that stage in time. So very, very interesting. And the options of synagogues for children, for schools will actually come about. And let's just say, and they're very much in correspondence, I think, Chile with the H network, obviously in Eretz Yisrael, with many of the leading poseks and the rabbis over there at that point in time. I think, especially famously in around 2010, in Rosh Hashanah, as many as 500 people came to pray in the Eish Torah Chile service, and Yom Kippur was 700 people. So you can see how it's boomed absolutely at that stage in time, and a lot more religious couples actually end up with from weddings and from lifestyle and end up coming to Eretz Yisrael over recent years. That's something that we have to point out also. So rabbinic couples and kiruv thriving in Chile is something that we've seen since the 21st century especially, and Chile have been doing fantastic work. Now other key rabbis, let's go back to key rabbis in Chile, include Rabbi Enjal Kramer Brill. I think he was born actually in December the 22nd in 1945, if I'm not mistaken. He's the director of the International Council of Christians and Jews in Latin America, and the vice president of the World Council of Synagogue. He was actually born in Argentina. He passed away in 2014 in Chile, in Arangucha itself. I think he's very well known for his human rights work. He would get a Human Rights Award in 1989, and was a rabbi of the Israelite Congregation of the Argentinian Republic, let's just say. And very, very interesting enough, he, I think, got married in 1969, and his wife was Susie, but she would later die in the 1994 AMIA bombing, and this would really never recover. It's reported over after she passed away. He was a graduate from the Latin American Rabbinical Seminary, and remember, this was, I think, more conservative seminary, which was founded by Marshall Mayer. I think at that point in time he was also well academically accoladed, let's just say. He was had various different accolades academically, let's just say, at a point in time. He was moved to Buenos Aires back in the 1990s, and he would take on a position in Chile rabbinate at that point in time, I think in 1995, to the southern city of Concepcion. I think eventually he would settle in Jerusalem. I think in 2012, in his last years of life, thank God, he would actually move closer to Orthodoxy, and he would die, I think, in the Brancuja Hospital in Chile. He suffered a heart attack in 2014, and I think he was resting at that point in time in Conquest Hot Springs, if I'm not mistaken. Another rabbi in Chile, I think currently, who's also a doctor, is Rabbi Matthias Libedensky. I think he was born in 1976. He's also a physician, an Orthodox rabbi there. And I think he was educated in Yeshivat Beit Israel, if I'm not mistaken, and Yeshivat Darkei Noam, I think also known as Chappelle's. I will receive an education, academic credentials in the Californian Instituto de Tecnología en Universidad de Chile, if I'm not mistaken. So he's not just a rabbi, he is a physician. Also, he studied in Darkei Noam, also known as Chappelle's College, I think between 2000 and 2002. He would then study in the Yeshivat Bet El Israel Center for advanced studies under supervision of Rabbi Natan Weiss, attaining a smicha, especially studying Nida laws from 2002 to 2006. He would return to Chile and form a group of rabbis of the Morasha institution, as I mentioned before. I think maybe connected very much. We spoke about Morasha, the rabbinic couple, just a few moments ago. We're doing fantastic work in Chile. He is actually the nephew of Marcus Libdensky Sean, a former minister of the Constitutional Court. He was not a rabbi himself, and the Supreme Court of Chile. And I think he's married to his rabbinate and has 7 children. I'm not sure the current status, just reading Wikipedia. In Obitov, another rabbi, let's just say, in Chile, happens to be a rabbi named Rabbi Eduardo Weingarten, was born in December 29, 1955. He happens not just to be a rabbi, an accountant and an administrator, and he's within the Circular Israelita Santiago de Chile. He's working as a representative over there, and he's a 5th chaplain of the 5th Fire Company of Nuna Bomba, Israel, and official rabbi of the Jewish community of Chile. And everyone tuning in at the moment, please subscribe to the channel if you're new to the channel. We're a community here, and today we're learning about the history of the Chilean Jewish community, so please subscribe, we'll appreciate it. So he was born, he's 69 years of age currently, was born in Buenos Aires, and received an education once again in Latin American Rabbinical Seminary. I think once again this is considered a conservative movement connected to, and studied at the University of Buenos Aires. He's also an accountant and a business administrator. And he graduated, I think, from the university in 1977. 1979, he would participate in founding the Iona Hebrew Center and would continue his studies, receiving a rabbinical ordination from Latin American Rabbinical Seminary in that specific year. I don't know if he considers himself an Orthodox rabbi or not. I'm not too sure also, but very, very interesting. We've been exploring the history of the Chilean Jewish community here on this special edition over here. And we've tried to speak about many of the rabbis. Not all of them we spoke about today happen to be connected maybe to the Orthodox trend. It was very difficult to find information on various different rabbis over here, so we did our best today for this. But it's a more recent Jewish community. The community today is more recently from the late 1800s, 1900s, but there was a community obviously in the late 1500s, early 1600s also respectively, which we've spoken about today. So we tried to include key figures over here. I hope it was informative, and we've already recorded about in this series about 16 to 18 videos of key countries that had more smaller Jewish communities, let's just say, yesteryear. So please watch over those previous videos also. If you're from South America or from Chile, please let me know. I'd love to keep more information also. And please, everyone, subscribe to the channel. We are nearing, at the moment, a staggering 8,000 subscribers. So let's try to get to that figure over here. So wishing you well. Take care, and thanks everyone for watching. It was a long video, about 82 minutes, but I hope it was informative and helpful. Thank you very much, and have a great